I started out in a council estate in Dundee with a mum and dad who weren't very well off. So I worked on one case which was really messy, and it involved sales conferences, sex, one-night stands. I did the accountancy because I thought it would give me some opportunity to earn an income. And I think that was something that was driven by my mum as well, because my mum was very much about being independent as a woman. For me, in life, it's about being happy. Look, life isn't all a bed of roses. You know, we have to deal with rubbish days, we have to deal with stuff going on. But I think in general, it's about do what you can to make yourself happy. Managing stress and trying to reduce stress for me is really important. And I think, you know, I would say that's one of the challenges that I think you face in a business. I didn't set out and say, right, these are the 5 values or 6 values.
Sure.
I think those evolved. But the values that we've now got in the business are probably the values that I've always had and always aimed to sort of, you know, create a business that reflected those. So I think, in short, one of my biggest things is I want to be treated in the same way as I'm treating somebody else. I think admitting that you've got something wrong is actually a strength. And I think for me, I think that's where people sometimes fall down, is not accepting that actually failing is actually admitting that you've made a mistake is a strength, because that's the only way you learn. Still, one of the top reasons why people leave jobs is the manager, It's absolutely core to everything is communication. My goal in life is to make myself redundant. I've got to find the people around me that are better and make myself redundant. I have made mistakes, but we all do. And and you've got to move on from them, but learn from them.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by the founder of Loch Associates Group, an award-winning lawyer, the wonderful Pam Loch. Pam, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Amazing. I'm so excited we've finally got here. We've talked about this a few times, haven't we?
We have. But maybe things are worth waiting for. Hopefully that's the case.
Absolutely that. I completely agree. I'm really excited to have you on and have this chat with you. So look, as always, we're going to start off. I want to go right back to the beginning, start of your journey. Talk to me, share a little bit about life growing up for you, what that was like, and something about that sort of shaped who sits in front of me today.
Right. Well, it's a few years ago I started out. But I think a lot of people assume that because I'm a solicitor now, that I sort of went to private school and I went on to uni. In fact, you know, I started out in a council estate in Dundee with a mum and dad who weren't very well off. My dad was an engineer but decided to actually retrain as a teacher, which took its toll on the family because they obviously, you know, had to fund some of the costs and stuff while he wasn't earning. But I think that sort of helped me because I saw a really strong work ethic, because my mum used to go out and do part-time jobs to sort of help, you know, provide for us. So yeah, we lived in a very small flat in Dundee. And from there, I then went to university, and I was the first person in the family to go to uni. But I didn't do law. So my dad was like, well, once you're 18, you're on your own. So I was like, crikey, I need to do something that I'm going to get a job at the end of it. So I thought, I'll do accountancy. So I did an accountancy and economics degree with a year of politics thrown in, which was interesting. And then I realised probably in year 2, actually I probably should have done law. But because my family didn't have very much money, I thought, I'm going to just have to carry on with this. So I did, but I got to the end of the 4-year degree. I got an honours degree. And I thought, I don't want to become an accountant. I was getting married to one instead. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, actually, I quite like working with people. I thought, why don't I do, it was called personnel in those days. And it was really early days for that. So we're talking about the late 80s. And we had a massive recession in Scotland at that time. So unfortunately, personnel was the sort of function that the companies all got rid of, first of all, and then marketing went next. So I thought, right, what I'm going to do. So actually, I sort of did the round. We used to do things called milk rounds. I'm not sure if they still do them at universities. But it was a mini version. It was a short version of a mini round because there just wasn't enough jobs. But I managed to pick up a job as a sort of management trainee with a company called Scottish Equitable. And I think that, again, really shaped what's happened in the future for me, because I spent 3 years on a management training programme with them. About 6-8 months into it, after doing compulsory overtime, because we had this massive backlog of claims. It was a 3-year backlog. And I thought, I don't want to be working at weekends. So I came up with a solution to get it reduced. So I came up with a system, and they said, fine. So they put me in charge of it, and we got it right down, which was amazing. But it meant that I could go to them and say, actually, could I get placement into your in-house legal team as part of my sort of, training? And they were a bit reluctant because they were, you're not a solicitor, we don't let solicitors into that team. And I said, well, give me a chance. So I went there and I ended up staying there for about 6 years. So, yeah, it was fascinating to do because I learnt an awful lot about people management. Also a lot of things about how not to manage people, because I think we don't always get it right. But yeah, I ended up spending 6 years there and then decided actually I probably should have done law. When my son was 2.5, I went back and did a law degree.
Which you had a son at that time?
Yeah, so I got married at 22, which is pretty young now when I look back. And I had Andy when I was 25. So yeah, he was 2.5 and I went back to uni and did what they call an accelerated law degree, because in Scotland you can't convert, you've got to do a full degree, but you can do it in 2 years instead of 3, so you just compress it. So I treated it like a job as best I could. And then actually, I knew at that stage, with my exposure to the in-house legal team, I'd started getting some appreciation of the sort of employment side of things, which was really early days of development in employment law. So I worked on one case which was really messy, and it involved sales conferences, sex, one-night stands, somebody else not thinking it was a one-night stand and then complaining they'd been sexually harassed, and it was a very messy case. But it sort of opened up my eyes to actually there's an interest in the area of law that I'd really quite like to get into. So when I went back to when I was at uni, I went to see, it was called Labour Relations professor there, and I said, look, I really want to get a placement and do some work in employment law. And he said, actually, I'm a consultant with this niche employment law practice. And at that time, it was only one in the UK, and it was based in Edinburgh, where I was doing my degree. He said, why don't you just say to them, I think you're a star, I'm recommending you, and you maybe get a placement there. So I did approach them, and I said, he'd recommended me, etc. And I thought I'd get a 2-week placement there, and I'd spend the rest of the summer with my son. And they said, well, come along, spend 3 months with us, and if it works out, we'll give you a training contract. So I didn't really have a choice, because I thought, wow. Because I was thinking at the age of 28, 29, I'm too old to get a training contract. Which I look back now, and that was probably a bit pessimistic. But yeah, I worked out. They thought I was obviously good, and they gave me the contract. So I went and I specialised in employment law really from that point on. And I also got a job as a research assistant while I was doing my degree, so they gave me work during term time as well. I look back, I have no idea how I fitted all this in.
I was just about to say, how do you go from that and looking at what you've got to go, I'm going to go and do another degree whilst trying to raise a son and earn money at the same, like, how did you feel? How did you feel?
I have no idea, because I look back, because I used to commute as well into Edinburgh, because we'd moved. When I had Andy, I initially thought I'll give up work, because I thought I'm going to just become a stay-at-home mum, because I thought that was the right thing to do. Unfortunately, I realised that didn't really fit with my personality. So after a few weeks at home, I thought, I want to go back. So I did go back. Actually, and again, this has sort of influenced what I do now. At that time, I asked to go back part-time because I'd moved into the countryside. So it was a good, 25-mile commute, which doesn't sound very much, but because of the infrastructure, it would mean that it would take me over 2 hours each way to get in and out to work. So, I suggested, going back part-time, and I think it was about 3 days a week I was suggesting. And they said, no, we can't allow that because we need you back full-time. So, it's a shame because that really it did put a lot of pressure on. And I remember being quite unwell. And of course, we were brought up, if it doesn't matter how sick you are, if you're dying, then you don't go to work. But otherwise, you've got to keep going to work. So you did keep on pushing yourself through. But, I did it. And then we sold the house eventually. Because we had a recession and we just moved to a new estate in the middle of the countryside, it took us 18 months to sell the house. So I had to keep on doing that all that time, but there was light at the end of the tunnel.
And I guess it's that thing, isn't it? Like, you put your mind on something that you want to achieve, and that is just part of the process. Yeah. I remember the same when I first took over the salon here. I learnt to ride a motorbike and commuted from Essex to Brighton for 2 years, 7 days a week on a motorbike. I'm like, every time I went back to Essex at the weekend, and I drive back, and I'm like, do this like 7 days, like getting up hour and a half over the but it's part of the process, right?
Yeah.
You just go, this is just part of the journey, whether hour and a half either way, 2 hours, whatever it is, you just go, this is my goal at the end, and I'll just get my head down and I'm going to make that happen. And there's sacrifices that you make on the way to do that, isn't it?
And sometimes you don't realise you're doing it until it's done. And as I say, I look back now, when I was at uni, the same labour relations professor said to me, we need somebody to tutor. It's called delict in Scotland, but it's tort. So it's to do with personal injury claims and things like that. And he said, we need somebody to tutor the pupils, the students. Would you be up for doing that? And I said, well, yeah. So I ended up tutoring in my lunch hours as well. So I did that. And then I moved on to tutoring tax.
Wow.
And we had such a really bad tax lecturer in those days. So I basically ended up with, 3 classes used to come into my group just because they didn't really understand, and somebody had heard that I could explain it to them. And so I used to have these these tutorials that were just huge, but they were fine. I mean, but you just did it. Yeah. And I look back and I have absolutely no idea. That's why I said to you, I have no idea how I managed to do all that.
Because you do, like you said, it is one of them things, isn't it? Sometimes you're just put into situations, and I guess, like you said, it builds where you are now and running a business, because you need all of those skills and resilience and everything else that comes with it to run a business, right? So you get put in those sort of situations and just go, I will just deal with it. I will just deal with what's in front of me and do it. And like we even mentioned before we come on air, have one of them mornings or whatever that looks like. You just get up every day and you try and go, I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got today. And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's all, I guess, especially when you run a business, because there's always something to do.
Yeah.
We never get to a point, I'm sure you don't, where you go, oh, that's it.
On top of everything.
Everything's done. Not so much, right?
No, and it's funny because I had a conversation with somebody yesterday where they said, oh, you're in early today. And I said, I just had a few things to catch up on. And they said, oh, you're behind on stuff. And I said, well, you never really get fully on top of everything. And I was like a bit bemused because I thought, is it, I think you've said that, basically when you're running a business, there's always something else coming and there's always something else you could be doing.
Yeah.
Even though you think you've got on top of everything else, you might have got on top of client work, but actually there's other stuff that you still need to get on top of. So it's life.
It's like, exactly, it's like, and I'm keen to just go back, so you've found that path, and obviously a lot of things have shaped where you've gone into that, but talk to me a little bit about, go right back to that beginning part, and what was there, you went into law thinking, when you started your degree, you thought, I'd like to do law, but was that what you wanted to be when you was at school, or what was your dreams? What did you think of?
Well, actually, I wanted to be a hairdresser.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I used to practice on dolls. And then my brother did practice on me once, and unfortunately it didn't go very well. I used to have long hair, and he decided to cut my hair, and I ended up, he got all the combs caught in my hair. So my mum couldn't get the combs untangled. So I ended up, I was looking like this little convict because I had to get my hair more or less all shaved off because it was the only way I could get these combs out of my hair. So I probably after that, I thought, I'm not sure about hairdressing.
He scarred you for the day. I'm out.
And then I did think about becoming a teacher. I think I sort of started moving towards law and thought about doing criminal law, actually.
Yeah, okay.
When I was at secondary school in this council estate in Dundee, and thought, yeah, but then I thought, I'm going to just end up in a situation where you're going to be dealing with repeat offenders all the time. And actually, I didn't think that was going to be what I would really get a buzz out of doing. So I thought when I went to do the accountancy degree, I did it principally just to get a career, and thinking actually accountancy is probably quite a good degree to do because then it opens up doors to different avenues. But I think the careers advice wasn't really helpful because, what put me off criminal law and doing law in particular was, the careers advisor said to me, well, you've got to basically, you've got to go out and represent rapists in court. And I was like thinking, I don't really think I want to do that. Whereas actually, law is much wider, and criminal law isn't quite as narrow as just telling you that you're going to have to represent rapists in court. So I think the careers advice was poor, but at the same time, I did the accountancy because I thought it'd give me some opportunity to earn an income, and I think that was something that was driven by my mum as well, because my mum was very much about being independent as a woman. She very much, my sister and I were brought up on the basis of get a career yourself, because then you don't feel like you're locked in. So she was, brought up in the days where you stay at home, you get your housekeeping money. She did go out and get part-time cleaning jobs, but she wasn't really fulfilled, I don't think. And I think she really instilled in me and my sister, get out, get qualified, get a career that you can really mean that you're independent and not reliant on somebody, which I think is what she probably felt.
I think that's such an important lesson. I guess look at what you've achieved and where you are, and as a woman in business to have created what you have done, coming from actually so much of it will come from that your mum going, not to rely on other, because that's a generational thing, isn't
Absolutely.
it? So much it is, and my mum possibly the same as well. You sort of, that was what was done, and that the man's goes out and works, and the woman's done. That's just obviously, thankfully, that's changed now.
It has. You're right, but actually, even when I had Andy at 25, it was still sort of most women stayed at home. I remember going along to the school, and I was a trainee at this time, and I sort of said to them, look, can I get some time out, extend my lunch hour so I can go to the sports day? And so Andy would have been about 6 at this point, and we were still living in Edinburgh. And at that time, he was at a school where there was a lot of the wags.
Really?
Yeah, they used to belong to it. So I was like, well, I've got to take part in the mum's race. So I had on this, I remember it now, I had this chocolate brown suit on, skirt suit. And I thought, I'm going to have to run. And of course, this is probably just the competitive side in me. I did win it, but I was just like, I was like doing this in my lunch hour. But I was the only mum there that was working. And throughout, Andy's schooling, I was very much the minority. The most mums were not working. And I think that's changing a bit. And I'm not saying that's necessarily, I'm not criticising anybody for decisions they make, but I think it was still it was very unusual in those days to have somebody like me. And I do feel I missed out because I didn't get to take part in the schoolgate chit-chats and all that sort of stuff. But, I made my choice and other people made their choices.
And I think, I always talk to Kelly about this, like my wife, because obviously I run businesses. She's a solicitor, she's in criminal law, but I think there's something about it for me. I do agree, and we're lucky now with a bit more flexible working, and the fact I run my own business, we are able to be at certain things, which is great. And there's obviously a lot more flexibility than perhaps there was back then. But I sort of say to Kelly, like, there's the element of we're still following our dreams and we're fulfilled. So not to the point that it's amazing being a parent. I love being a dad. It's an amazing thing, but I don't want to just be a dad. And Kelly doesn't, I guess, just want to be. And I'm not I'm saying there's anything wrong with that either, but I'm just saying that actually there's a difference in the fact that you can go, I hope that, maybe we're going to miss out on the odd thing here and there, but I hope that, similar to your parents with a work ethic, I hope that I'm going to give them values. I hope they're going to see that, and they're going to see that. But not only, I don't think only the fact that of a strong work ethic, but actually something that we love doing. Like Kelly's wanted to do. We've known each other since she was 11. She's wanted to do law since she was 11. I'm still finding, I suppose, the things I'm doing with the different hats. Right, I wear different hats. So this is the thing. But I love that. I'll still do things that light me up, and I think like, for you and your kids, you're following what you wanted to do, and there's something. I think there's something so valuable in that lesson for our children. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, in life, it's about being happy. Look, life isn't all a bed of roses. You know, we have to deal with rubbish days. We have to deal with stuff going on. But I think in general, it's about what do what you can to make yourself happy. So, you know, my son has emigrated to the US. He went out there on Camp America, fell in love with it, and he's living out there. He's set up a business. He's now married to my stepdaughter, and they're now about to have a baby out in the States, and they're really happy. And you know, that's all that matters. And I think he's now, you know, he's got his own business. I was a bit sad when he woke up one night and said, you know, he was going on about how he couldn't sleep because he was thinking about his business. And I thought, I was really hoping that you wouldn't be like that. But, you know, somebody else said to me, but it's like that with a business. You know, if something's going on in your mind, you can't help yourself. So, you know, because I think managing stress and trying to reduce stress for me is really important. And I think, you know, I would say that's one of the challenges that I think you face in a business, you know, depending on your personality. And I'd like to try and minimise the stress that I'm under as best I can, but critically also for the people around me. So it's how do we manage that? Because I think that stress has such a negative impact on you, you know, mentally, but also physically. I think people underestimate the impact stress has.
Now, how do you manage stress? How have you? Has
Well,
it changed?
Bruce, my husband, would probably say offload on it. Yes, I think it has changed to some extent. I do a lot of exercise. So I do a combination of. I was doing a lot of running until I had to get an operation on my foot, but I'm actually back trying to do a bit of running again. When I say running, it's probably more jogging. And then I do a lot of walking with the dog, and the dog does bring me a lot of unconditional love. So. But I do think it's important to talk to people. So Bruce is right. I probably do offload on him. I think it's important to, you know, talk to people and listen to people, because it's, you know, it's a two-way thing. People are going through stress and you want them to talk to you about it and offload and try and help where you can. So, yeah, I do sort of try and talk about things and try not to bottle stuff up, which I think is really important. But also I try to use exercise. And at the weekends, I try to do a bit of cooking, and I socialise with people, and you know, and try to get as much positivity in my life. Because unfortunately, the job I do with the type of work I do, sometimes I have to deal with quite a lot of negative aspects of the human trait beings.
Yeah, sure. No, I get. It's interesting. So, do you feel that you're, like you say, you get to those weekends maybe and social stuff? Are you able to switch off? Because we said about, obviously with the business there's always something to do, so there's always stuff on your mind and stuff, but are you able to switch off a bit when you do have those downtimes?
I'm not very good at it, but when I'm out doing a long walk or I'm out running, I find that is great for sort of helping me just switch off. And I think obviously if you're out with friends having dinner or a glass of wine, and you know, you can sort of switch off then. But I do try. Yeah, it's one of my sort of. I'm not very good at it. No.
But I think as a business owner, one of the things are a couple of things. One from doing this, I find it very therapeutic for me. It's very cathartic. I love having these conversations. But the key for me, I think you mentioned about listening and as well as conversing with people. But it's about so much we can in life about trying to be in the moment. Right? Yeah. That's where this enables me to do that. Yeah. Which is great because we're having a conversation within the moment and I try and take what I learn from here really into So when I'm with the kids, I'm not with my phone. I'm trying to be in the
Yeah.
moment with them, or whatever we do in life, whether I'm hosting an event on the stage, I'm here, or whatever you're in, just trying to be in that moment. That for me is a key thing, and but it's really hard to do because I've tried. Do you meditate? I've tried to meditate. Do you meditate?
I don't think I'd be very good at it. I think I'd be very good at it. No, I'm not very good. I mean,
No.
I try to. I think one of the challenges is trying to relax. So I was away on holiday recently, and I thought, right, I've got to basically sit down and just do nothing, and try not to think about work. And I want to report back I did successfully do that. But that was, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think whatever works for you. I mean, some people, do use mindfulness and meditation and, and that's fine. I mean, for me, I probably am better when I'm out walking because I go over things in my head. Then I can just once I've dealt with them, then they're gone. And I think for me, that works better for me.
But that is a form of mindfulness. I say I swim in the seal well, I swim, and that is my time to switch off. I can but I think there's that thing with mindfulness and meditation that you feel that you have to be sitting down.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not. I'm no good at that. I'm just why am I sitting here? But that doesn't work for me. But it does obviously for some people. But it's just trying to find what, as you said, I guess it's what works for you. I'm keen to look at. So you've changed of career, but we got go right. I'm gonna do an accountancy degree. What's really important for that? I guess how much does that degree help with the business side of things?
Oh, massively.
I guess,
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I wish I'd done my psychology instead of politics.
Oh, it?
Yeah,
Right,
because we do use quite a lot. We're obviously in the job we're doing. We're trying to some extent predict human behaviour, so we can then think about how do we. Because a lot of what we do is strategy and trying to find a solution and a way through when we've got a difficult, tricky situation with a client. So we're trying to advise them on next steps and thinking about how's a human being likely to react. Now, when I say a human being, there's a whole range of human beings out there. So, understanding the whole range and thinking about the sort of various ways people would respond is really important to what we do. So I look back and think, I wish I'd done that year of psychology instead of the politics. But aside from that, I mean, we did do a year, was it 2 years where we did legal law courses, and I did learn a lot about, in those days, that was when they started introducing the own brand drinks. So this is way back, but I think it was Tesco or somebody started it off with a blue and white stripes brand.
Yeah.
I found out that I think it was Gordon's Gin was their sort of own brand, and we got a whole load of sort of information from there. It was really useful, but it's not really helped me too much in the future. But the accountancy degree, doing the economics, all of that has really helped. There's no doubt, because I think, and I also did a lot of public speaking at school.
Well, okay.
Didn't like doing debating as much, but I did a lot of public speaking at school and entered into lots of competitions as teams and things. And I think, doing the teamwork in there, I was in the netball team, and then also combining the sort of public speaking with the accountancy gives you that sort of business angle, but also the ability to go out and talk, which obviously has been quite important in the development of the business.
Yeah, of course. Because whatever, I always think this, and I talk about this a lot, but whatever industry we're in, whatever service we're doing, whatever your business is, people buy from people still.
They do.
And that's if there's one skill, I guess, or something I want to develop in the kids, it's just that ability to sit in a room and have a conversation with someone and be a good person, right? And try and do things with integrity. You do them, put your values or whatever that looks like. But just being able to, look, we're on the networking scene, we network a lot, but just going out there and being able to be in a room where you can build relationships, and that is, for me, one of the fundamental keys of running a business.
Without a doubt. And to be honest, that's how I've managed to build up the business, is going out there. I mean, a lot of people refer working to me because they maybe worked with me or they've come across me in the past. But, when I arrived in Tunbridge Wells, I originally set up the business in London in 2007, and my ex-husband, he was working in Hastings at the time, and Hastings to London is just not commutable. So we sort of thought, well, we'll find somewhere in the middle. So it was either Sevenoaks or Tunbridge Wells. So I was on my own at this time in the business. So I went for Tunbridge Wells because I thought it's a bit better for my son to be based in. And I just went out and networked because I knew nobody in Tunbridge Wells. And, it's interesting because obviously a lot of people know me now in Tunbridge Wells. They know me for 16, 17 years, and they've seen, how things have developed and where we've moved. Because then from a little room in my house, I moved into a 2-person office, then we moved into a 4-person, then we moved into a bigger office, and now we're struggling for space in the office that we've now got in Tunbridge Wells. So, it's been hard work, but it's been great to have the opportunity to go out and meet people. But that's how we built the business up.
That's incredible. And what take me back to that moment? What led you to because you was in London when you were working for some big law forever sheds, but what led you to 2007 go, I'm going to start my own business? Was it on the career path that you was on? Was it in the back of your mind, I'm going to do this for myself one day, or was there a point where you went, I'm going to go and do this?
I think what happened was I'd had the exposure to working in the insurance business, and knowing that actually you can work really well as a team, and you can really have a bit of fun as well, to be honest, working. And I went into I've been in different law firms, so I've worked for Eversheds, I've worked for US law firms, I've worked for regional practices. I've just never found what I was looking for I won't burst in a song. But that's basically, I've always been trying to find that sort of similar ethos to what I had experienced at Scottish Equitable.
Right.
And I remember I was probably moaning to my husband, and this is my ex-husband at the time, and he said, look, the only way you're going to be happy is if you set up on your own. And that was probably before I moved down to London, because he'd got another job. We moved down to London. I thought, I've always wanted to work in London. I thought, great opportunity. Let's try another practice down there. So I was a partner in a business down there. Then I moved to the US law firm, and I thought, I'm still not finding what I'm looking for. And so I decided to set up on my own. I thought, that's the only way. So, because I wanted to set up a team where we're all working as a team, where, we can be fulfilled. But as I say, I think trying to have fun at work is really important as well. So it's trying to get all of that combined together. So, what we do is try to take a completely different approach. So instead of having, some law firms operate with, each partner is it's a bit like a silo. They've got their own practice. Yeah. We don't want to work like that. So it's our clients. We all work together on the client work. If somebody goes off on leave, we cover you so you get a break. And you come back, and it's not a case of somebody's held on to your client work. You get the client work back, because I've worked in some practices where it's all very territorial, and it just doesn't fit the way I want to work. So we try to have as an egalitarian business where it's very collaborative. Obviously, there has to be a degree of hierarchy to some extent, but it's about respecting each other and everybody being as equal as we possibly can make it, so they can contribute to the development of the business as well.
Love that. And I know we spoke before we sort of come online. Obviously, you, with what Loch does and go in and support businesses, and we talked about culture, right, and how important it is within an organisation. I think, as you sort of alluded to some of the bits there, but talk to me a little bit about. Was you really clear when you started the business that I want to create a culture like this, and have you stuck to that, or?
I think one of the biggest things that I really don't want to have in a business is any form of bullying. So I think it's really important everybody respects each other. I don't like, I know office politics exists, but I don't want to have that, because it ends up in gossiping and cliques developing. So what we want to do is try and make sure that's minimised as far as possible. So I think I didn't set out and say, right, these are the 5 values or 6 values we're going to... I think those evolved. But the values that we've now got in the business are probably the values that I've always had and always aimed to sort of, create a business that reflected those. So I think, in short, one of my biggest things is I want to be treated in the same way as I'm treating somebody else. I think, that to me is the key thing. We talked before about, people that might lie to you. That is a big thing for me. I think honesty is really important. Yeah. Honesty, integrity, respecting people, collaboration, innovation is important as well. It's trying to, because people come up with ideas, and I think that's great because it keeps the business alive. So you don't want to be stuck. You want to encourage people to be constantly thinking about how do we improve what we're doing? How can we do better? So I think it's about, And as a result of doing that, you then get the best out of people because they feel they're valued, and they are valued. You know, you recognise actually, because I don't have the best ideas, lots of other people have better ideas than me. So it's encouraging people to be part of that development.
And I guess empowering them to do that as
Absolutely.
well. And what's your, because it's really interesting, people mention that type of process and in relation to failure. So people come up with an idea and that doesn't work. What's the relationship, your relationship like with failure, or with encouraging people to give that a go, and how do you view that?
I think admitting that you've got something wrong is actually a strength. And I think for me and I think that's where people sometimes fall down is not accepting that actually failing is actually admitting that you've made a mistake is a strength, because that's the only way you learn. Now, I'm not saying we should be we don't want to fail, really. We want it, but we want it to always succeed. But the reality is you don't always succeed, and for various reasons. And that could be external forces that have impacted it. And I think it's then, for me, it's a big learning process. So if I fail or something goes wrong, I want to learn from that, what went wrong, not from the point of view, going like forensically analysing it to death, but I think you can always take a positive from something that's gone wrong or something that hasn't worked the way you'd like to make it work. And I don't think you should be fearful of going back to a process that you've moved on from, because I think that's something else. I've been doing this now, as I say, the business has been running for about 17 years. And we tried, there's various things that we haven't quite got right yet. And sometimes you just go back and say, right, actually, let's go back to what we were doing it before. Because actually, although that maybe we didn't think it was the right thing or the best way to do it, it works better than this way. And that's not a bad thing to sort of necessarily think about, actually, let's go back and regroup and then think about another way we can approach this.
Yeah. And it's being brave to look at something and say, how can we improve? Like you said, well, I've got this process in place. I think it can be better. We're going to try this. Oh, that's not worked. So we'll do this again. But that might. And it is. It's just, I think the ability, especially I've had people on here within the tech industry, for example, and they've got to really fail fast, right, but fail forward. But the key with any form of failure, my T-shirt says, there's no failure, only feedback. And I've failed many, many, many times. But always think if you can reflect and learn, like as you mentioned, it's so valuable to it. And I think as a team and as a business and as you're growing, enabling, like you said, empowering people to be brave enough to come to you with, so there's not such a hierarchy. I can't mention that, but look, come up with an idea and empowering people to do that, and they feel the freedom, because in that they've got that purpose as well, and they're part of it. And like you said, and then the growth of your business over 17 years comes from, you mentioned it a few times about a team. It comes from a team effort, not just you or the other two partners or three or whatever. And it's such a valuable lesson, I think, for people, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Cool. Look, talk to me again, obviously with what you guys do, I guess, with employment law, the HR side of stuff, health and wellbeing, mediation as well, and stuff like. Talk to me about some of the things that going into the businesses that you do, some of the common problems that you see within those businesses, and maybe some of the solutions that you come up with. I mean,
we've actually extended the business, and that's partly driven by experiences that we've had. So on the employment law side, a lot of people, I'll sometimes sit down at maybe at a lunch, a networking lunch or something, and somebody will say, what do you do? And you'll say, I do employment law. I might have said I'm an MD, Loch Associates, but let's say it was employment. Anyway, so I'll sit down and I'll say, do employment law, and they go, you can almost feel the sort of, this is going to be really boring. And then you start speaking to them, and, obviously we can't divulge anything that's confidential, but we start talking about maybe scenarios that we've experienced over the years. And there's been some very interesting ones, involving Mars bars, jars of mayonnaise. I don't know if I'm allowed to use the word masturbating, but porn, all sorts of things. And every day is a surprise for me. There's something that I'm like, crikey. So, it's quite fascinating what human beings will do in or out of the workplace that affects, obviously the client, and then they come to us to talk about it. And usually at the end of the lunch, they go, wow, I thought employment law was just doing contracts. Well, yes, there is an element of, we do some drafting of documentation, advising on restrictive covenants, advising on, what strategies they need to put in place, maybe in respect of a reorganisation or restructuring. But it's much wider than that. It's all to do with people in the business. So the HR side of things, I used to say they're like the sort of contraceptives quite often, where they're sort of trying to put preventative measures in place. And we do an element of that as well. Yeah. But, the employment lawyers tend to be the ones that are sort of doing the sort of the morning after pills. So they're sort of fixing the issues. We're often getting involved, minimising the damage, trying to work out the strategy and how to deal with the situation, and representing clients at employment tribunals or in the civil courts as well. But what we found was we saw a growing trend. We were getting involved in quite a lot of disputes between shareholders and directors, and we're often advising on the shareholder agreements. And we were thinking to ourselves, why are we not drafting these ourselves, actually? Because we can do all this. Yeah. We're all trained lawyers. It's not, we didn't go to uni and just did employment law. And when we did our training contracts, we did much more than this. And we thought, actually, what we should be doing is extending our services to commercial law. And so that makes sense, because then we're able to advise on the whole thing. So we can sort of, and often what we do is we'll do what we call post-mortems with clients. So once we've sort of found a solution and we fix the issue, we'll probably be identifying along the way and speaking to clients about how they could have avoided the issue. But after we've sort of reached the conclusion, we will do this sort of post-mortem. We'll talk to the client about, actually, this is how we could avoid this happening in future. And one of the things you could be doing is having shareholder agreements that are drafted better, because it would have put you in a better situation. So we're doing more of that, and we're doing immigration law as well, because we've got clients that realise that actually they're not going to be able to maybe recruit people in the UK, they're having to look further afield, and so how do they bring people into the UK to be able to work with them? So again, it's all about trying to innovate what we do in terms of the services we provide to clients, to try and ensure that we can be a one-stop shop. So whatever issues they're experiencing, or how can we prevent those issues because of our knowledge. So we'll go into business, we'll look at them, we'll do HR health checks, figure out where they've got maybe issues or potential problems, and we'll try and fix it with training. Things like, a lot of managers are not properly trained, and that is fundamentally where you get quite a lot of issues. That can be the source of a problem in a business, because the manager is maybe lacking in confidence on how to deal with situations. If you can train them so they know how to deal with it and nip it in the bud. So we do nip it in the bud training, where you can really, upskill your managers so they have got the confidence to deal with a situation. That can actually, really head off a lot of issues. So it's trying to work with clients to sort of find the best solutions to help protect the business and their people.
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. What from a training point of view, talk to me about, especially working with managers, I guess, and a management team. What makes a good manager? What makes a good leader in your eyes?
Ooh, I do think listening is a great skill, but I think it's also having that confidence to be able to have difficult conversations. It's also about motivating your staff, understanding what motivates them and being able to work with them to motivate them. And that's quite a challenging skill set to have, I think. I think a lot of managers maybe manage taking a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. And that's not the case, as we all know, because everybody's different. That's not to say there's certain similarities between people in terms of what motivates them, but I think you've got to really spend some time with your team and understand what motivates each one. So, we do monthly one-to-ones with staff because I think it's really important to give them the opportunity to give you feedback so you understand, but also you can learn from that as to what's motivating them. But equally, you shouldn't be waiting for one-to-ones. As a manager, you need to be given, you need to be engaging with people on a regular basis and giving them feedback. And I think nowadays especially, you know, if I look back at the management training that I had, you know, back in the sort of early 90s, it's completely different. There's still similar issues around time management and etc. But now managing people is, I think it's, I mean, I've always said it's one of the toughest jobs to do is managing
100%.
people. But I think it's much more challenging now, because I think if were trained as a manager in the 90s or the early 2000s, the way you're having to manage now is very different, because you do need to give more regular feedback to people and make sure you are praising people. And sometimes it might not be enough, so you've got to make an adjustment. You've got to think about how do you manage it.
Do you think, with that in mind, like you said, over your career, I guess seeing the changes in management styles, do you think like there's a lot more, I guess, soft skills now that are required to make a good leader?
Yeah, without a doubt. I do think it's really the one thing that I think is presenting challenges. As I said before, if you can get your managers with the right skill set to manage people effectively, you can head off so many issues. The problem you've got is a lot of people still get promoted because they're good at what they do. So, you know, the typical one where you've got somebody that's brilliant at sales, you promote them up to a sales manager, and then they become a sales director. That's not really what they wanted to do anyway, but it's actually, they don't have the right skill set to do that, because their skill was in selling. Whereas actually sales manager, sales director, they need to be leaders, they need to be managing. That's a completely different skill set. So I think sometimes you need to probably do some sort of assessment, you know, before you promote somebody. Do we think they're going to have the right skill set to do this? And then you've got to make sure they've got the right management training in place to help them, you know, really, fulfill the role properly. Because that can, you know, it's still one of the top reasons why people leave jobs is the manager. Now, most people think it's pay. Now, obviously, when we've got a cost of living crisis ongoing, a lot of people need to sort of look at their pay. But actually, quite often, if you go and ask for a pay rise and you can put forward, I mean, I recommend you put forward a good case for getting a pay rise. Don't just go and say, I would like a pay rise.
I need a few more quids.
But, you know, if you could, you know, quite often you will get a pay rise if you can justify it. But actually, managers, when you look at surveys, often it's the manager that's the principal reason why somebody has left.
Wow.
And that is, I think, partly down to lack of respect, because they don't think maybe they're watching how they're managing other people. There's a lack of consistency, which I think, again, is really important when you're managing people, is being consistent in how you treat people. There may be favouritism going on, which is, again, is not a good thing. And I think it's making managers aware, because sometimes managers are just not aware of what they're doing. They're not aware that they might be behaving in a more favourable way towards one person, and that comes across in inconsistent treatment. So I think it's, you know, for me, I still would always say, get your policies in place. Because the one thing I've noticed over the years is employees always look now at their handbook and the policies first, whereas years ago nobody ever used to look at handbooks. Now they go straight to the handbook. So your managers need to know what the policies say to be able to enact, you know, put them into to be able to, you know, make sure they're following them properly, and then be consistent with the way in which they're making decisions that align with the handbook and the policies that you've got in place. So, you know, to make your life easier, make sure you've got policies in place that you're happy with, that reflect the culture. Then make sure your managers are trained on the policies and know how you would like them applied, and apply it consistently. You know, and that is, it sounds basic, but a lot of the time we aren't, you know, we're not doing that.
Wrong,
Yeah,
I get. And I guess, like as you said, from a management point of view, it's back to that thing of culture, right? As you're building a management team, it's making sure that as those people are upskilling, that they're all of their skill sets are still aligning with the core values of the business. And I think, and what you mentioned there, I find that really fascinating. Like the stepping up. Some people are brilliant, maybe at their job, and deserve a promotion, deserve to get up to that next level. But actually, my wife's a perfect example. She become managing partner of the law firm, but actually has stepped away from that because she stopped practicing the law, and that's what she got into in the first place. Because she ended up, most of her time was taken up managing people. And she was actually really good at it, but like didn't enjoy that side of it, and I think that's people sometimes get that confused. I want to climb that ladder, this corporate ladder, I want to get to the top of that thing. But actually, back to what you mentioned earlier about happiness, fulfillment. That's what we want out of life and out of a career or a business or whatever those things are. And so much of that, for me, comes back to your core values as a person. Is what I'm doing today in my business, is what I'm doing in my career, does it align with my values and where I am? Then that does it, like you said, money, cost of living, that's an important part of it, but the other side for me is so much more important, right?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And I think you're right. I mean, look, sometimes people get promoted and they didn't actually want to do the job, you know, but it's almost like they get caught up in that and then feeling that I've got to go for partner, or I've got to go for, you know, a director's job or a manager's job, but actually I don't really want to be doing it. And I think that's evidence of somebody who's very strong. That takes quite a lot of strength to actually say, do you know what? I don't want to do that because this is what I want to do. This is what I'm happy doing. You know, and I think that's the other side of it is you know, listening to people and finding out what they want to get out of their career. And that's why, you know, doing your one-to-ones, talking to them about, you know, what they feel they've achieved, what they like to achieve, you know, and having development plans in place that, you know, help people really achieve what they want to achieve, whatever that is. And that may well be staying where they are, but actually they want to learn maybe about some technical aspects in more detail, so they maybe go on a course to do that. So I think it's all about individualised plans, listening to what somebody wants, trying to help them achieve that, and then they'll be fulfilled. It doesn't mean to say that they want to become the managing partner, because quite often people don't want to do that.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing, isn't it? We want to, as business owners as well, you want to empower people, you want them to improve, but actually it's accepting as well that there are some people that are just happy where they are, and that's why it doesn't mean they're not motivated. They may just love what they do and just want to. But the only way, a key thing I'm taking from so much of what you're saying, I think, is communication.
Absolutely,
is key, right?
It's absolutely core to everything is communication. And I think, you know, one of the other things I think is playing to people's strengths. You know, I know there's people in our business that don't want to do certain aspects of what I do, and I can understand why. But that's, you know, that is part of the job. But actually, because I do all of this, does that mean to say that we have to at some point replace me with somebody that does the same? Actually, no. What you do is you can get, you know, a team of people that all have those different aspects, and together they play, you know, they can do. I mean, I'm not trying to sell myself as being something that doesn't exist out there. I'm just saying that I think sometimes, you know, you might have a set of skills that you've acquired because I did an accountancy degree, because I've done the public speaking, because I've done this and that. But actually, it might not be possible to find somebody like me, but you can find other people that have got different skill sets that actually complement what I do, and together they make up that sort of, you know, that role.
100%. And actually as well, look, one of the things, for one of the reasons the podcast called Different Hats, not obviously just because of the different hats, but actually as a business owner, when you first start out, you are doing everything,
Everything,
right?
yeah.
And look, you've got an accountant, you had a little bit of a head start on a lot of people who start a business who haven't got a clue about finances and stuff like that, but you actually wear all of those hats. So of course you're going to build those skill sets as the business grows, as you go, but at the starting point, you go right back to 2007. You're doing everything. You're
writing the Christmas cards, licking the stamps, and putting them. Yeah, you're doing everything.
Marketing director, sales director, you know, all of those roles, and you learn how to do. And like you say, I think where you know we get to a point where we go, I know I'm not brilliant at all of those. I've got a handle on all of them, but I need to get better people in to do that role. Better people in to do that role, and that's like you said. But that's what makes a great leader, right? To be able to recognise that and.
Well, I mean, my goal in life is to make myself redundant. I've got to find the people around me that are better, and make myself redundant, and that's my ultimate goal. Because I mean, at some point, I do need to. I mean, you know, I've got to retire at some point. I don't like the word retirement, though. I think it's just another phase in your life. You know, I think it's doing something else different, but enabling other people to step into my shoes, because I think that's really important. Because, for me, and I'm going to use the word sustainable in this way, I want to create now a sustainable business. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, which is to surround myself with a team of people that are fantastic to work with. I now want to be able to develop a sustainable business that they can take over at some point. So that to me is my goal. And while we're doing that, still continue to have some fun along the way. And feel like we've really achieved something really great for clients.
Love that. With that in mind, and you get into that phase, how important is the legacy of Loch to you? Like, do you see that as wanting to see the growth? Like you said, the people in the business at the moment look to take that over. Is that important to you?
That would be important. Yeah, at the moment it is. That really is where I would like to end up, because I think, I've got people working with me. Joe started out with me as an admin apprentice, and he's now, an equity partner, having done his law degree, trained as a barrister, he's a solicitor advocate.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's great. So for me, what I would like to do is be able to say, you take over the reins and you crack on. I would get a massive buzz out of that, but that would be fantastic. So that would be a goal. Yeah. If that can't be achieved, that's life, and I'm not like heading off into the sunset very soon. I don't want to, but I think it's important that we're honest about it. Yeah. The reality is, I want to make sure that people feel fulfilled, and if that means that I have to sort of step into another role, or and they then step in, that's great. So, when we'll be restructured and I'll be made redundant. That's my goal. But realistically, what I want to do is ideally leave it with them so they can then take up the reins and then, carry on.
Amazing. And talk to me about that. I'm always keen on the podcast to always share some of the challenges we face running a business. I think, I'm a massive supporter of entrepreneurship and people starting a business, and I love it. I want to encourage people to do it, but at the same time, it's fucking hard work sometimes,
it's
right?
Very hard work, yeah.
And there's a lot of ups and downs on this roller coaster that we go on, and I've been in some tough, dark places, and you go, why am I could just go and get a job and it'd be so much easier, but that's not who we are, and we do get out of those things. But so I'm always keen to share some of the stories and some of the challenges that we face. So over 17 years of running a business, starting out on your own to where you are now, share some of the challenges maybe you faced over that time.
I think one of the challenges that you face is probably cash flow and getting debt collection right. Now I think that's changed over the last few years. I think it's much tougher now. I mean, we spend much more time on trying to avoid getting into a situation where we're having to obviously chase debtors, but we have to put quite a bit of resource into it, making sure that we get the money in, because obviously cash is still king. Yeah. Even though it's cardless mainly. But I think it's getting the financial side of it. If you get in a good accountant, and somebody who works with you from the once you get to a certain size, being able to help you manage the finances internally, and getting a really great external accountant as well that can give you some insights. I think for me that's been one of the biggest challenges. I think for a small business it's really tough, because I think there's only a limited amount of talented people that are able to do that, and obviously quite often they're more attracted to bigger businesses. So I think it's identifying and having somebody in place that can really help you manage the finances, keep, as I say, the debtor situation under control.
Have you ever been in that situation at the early stages, or even later on, where cash flow has been a problem?
Yes, and that was because unfortunately we had somebody who was in the finance role who was misleading us about what they were doing. They weren't actually issuing invoices. Wow. So they were lying about what they were doing, and I fortunately spotted there was a problem, because I could see the cash coming into the bank. It had slowed down quite a bit, and when I approached them about it, they still continued to lie about it and came up with some unbelievable stories involving the IT company that we were using. So I got in touch with them, and they were like, we've got no idea what you're talking about. There's no internal investigation going on here. And then obviously the alarm bells went. Now I think I'm quite fortunate. This is sad, but fortunate because of the job I do. I'm probably a bit more cynical than other people. So I thought there's something afoot here, and moved quite quickly. Had I not done so, because if you believe somebody, and I think this is where it comes in with my sort of business background. I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, this isn't stacking up. So but I had to put quite a lot of resource into it because, we needed to get that person left the business. They resigned the day after I'd said to them, we're going to have to start an investigation into this because there's something wrong here because it's not stacking up with what you're saying. And then I had to get as much resource into it in terms of getting other people involved and trying to identify what's actually been happening. And I still to this day don't know whether this person was just a serial liar or whether they had just become overwhelmed. But we are incredibly supportive. I mean, we try, we encourage people to tell us when they make mistakes because we can sort of fix things. So I think sometimes you come across people personality-wise, you can't really do anything about it. You're just in a situation where you can't actually identify you're dealing with somebody who may well be a serial liar, or you've got yourself into a situation where you've just got to get through it. So that was a situation that we obviously had to spend quite a bit of money bringing in somebody externally to try and fix the situation. But you learn from that. It's very painful and it's very stressful, but you do learn from that, and I think you're much quicker picking up things. But I do think had I not had the background that I had, I might not have been quite so quick on that, and because of what I do, I was a bit more cynical about it. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge, is sort of managing the finances, making sure that the people that you've got in these roles you can rely on, and that they are doing what they're saying they're doing, and you've got to put checks and balances unfortunately into place to make sure that's happening.
You're right. It's probably the thing that cripples most businesses is cash flow, isn't it? Just the fact of people not being people have been on here and going, just know your numbers.
Yeah.
And if you're not good at that, get someone
else
to do it.
And you just got to hope that they know what they're doing as well, which is just where you then end up with a problem. But sometimes you end up in situations that are not your own making. Do you know what I mean? It's just an unfortunate combination of events. I think the other challenge is people. Is getting the right people, and I think, I think now we're at a size where if we don't recruit the right person, they stand out like a thumb. Oh, that's the right phrase, but that you can see they're not fitting and they're not gelling into the team.
But that's down to the values that you've instilled and the culture that you've created, right?
Yeah, and it is unfortunate because they're not fitting in. There's no point. I'll try and work with somebody as best we can, but if fundamentally they don't share the same values, it's not going to work. And I think rather than sitting there trying to pretend to yourself that it's going to work, I think you have to take the bull by the horn and you've got to have an honest conversation with somebody and say to them it's not working out. And quite often people don't want to hear that because they really like maybe working there. And that's quite a difficult conversation then to have with them because it's a bit like breaking up. So I compare parting with somebody at work as being similar to splitting up in a relationship. Usually they're getting dumped and they're not happy about being dumped. And that's what that's essentially what's going on, because they think they found the perfect relationship. They're loving the relationship. Actually, it's not working out for you. You need to take that step. And I think that's really difficult because, nobody really wants to sort of exit somebody. You're not, that for me is not really a great result. But I think you've got to be strong in that and actually say, do you know what? This is the right decision for the business.
And because of the strong culture that you've created there, do you find that like other members of the team will identify someone that doesn't fit in quite, maybe talk to you about that and go, this is maybe not quite working out from what I've seen? Because I guess if you've got those core values that come from the team, not just you, but I guess from the team, but you've started out with, this is what I want to try and achieve here, and people have bought into that. That's why you've grown and you've kept growing and you've built that, and it runs throughout the team. That's why we say it's like the bloodline of a business, that culture piece that you've created. That then when someone comes in, whatever point that is, that everyone in the team can identify that. Have you found that?
Yeah, people do come and speak to me.
Yeah.
And look, if somebody came and spoke to me and said, some negative things about X, we're not going to immediately sort of jump on it, but what we're going to do is try and explore what are the issues, because it may well be it's a personality thing between the two of them, and actually we're going to explore that. Or it could be, I don't know, they've maybe been working on something together and it's gone a bit awry. So I will try and work with them, and we'll try and work together on sort of how do we move that relationship forward, because it may well be it's not that they're just a bad fit, it's just, as I say, that something's not worked out between the two of them. But there'll be other things where there'll be more than one person is flagging up something to me. Now, we don't operate a business where people come and grass people up to me.
No.
And I don't want to have a business like that. But what will happen is there'll be things that people sort of alert me to, or say, look, just think you should be aware of this. So that I'm then, it's on my radar, I'm now aware of it, and I'm thinking, right, okay, maybe that's something we need to do some training on. So maybe that's because sometimes people come into the business and they've had experiences elsewhere that actually aren't the sort of behaviours that we would want to have in our business, but they've not been made aware of that, so they're sort of lacking in self-awareness to some extent in terms of how they're operating. So they've sort of introduced behaviours that they've learnt from, and actually you can sort of remove those, you can change those behaviours sometimes by talking to somebody and explaining how they're coming across, because sometimes people just, as I say, are not aware. So there's various things you can do, and so we will work with somebody first of all to try and see if we can actually get them to sort of change their behaviours so that actually they're more matching up to the way we would expect people to operate. So that's part of the education thing, and I suppose training managers or people generally. So, but if that doesn't work, or there's other alarm bells ringing, then we would start having conversations with somebody about it, especially an early stage. And if they've joined, and obviously usually they'll be in a probation period, we'll be talking to them about it and making them aware this is a concern, how do we address it. But sometimes there's just some fundamental things that actually, and despite how many interviews, what processes you go through, you can't identify that at the interview stage, or in fact they've lied to you at the interview because they want to get the job. There's nothing you can really do until you take them on board, and then you realise actually they're not the right fit. But we do work really hard at trying to make sure if we can retain somebody, we would want to retain them, but if they're not going to fit in the business and the values, it's not in their interests to stay in the business either, because they're not going to gel with the team. They're always going to stand, for things like Christmas nights out or whatever. You can see they're not going to fit in. So it's not benefiting anybody if they're going to be feeling like that, and we're not happy with their fit either.
No, I get it. I think that's, like you said, we keep going back to that point of culture and just being. I think once you're really clear on what you want that to be, and people have bought into that, and you've grown a business to the size that you have, that it's easier to be clearer where you are. You know that, and like you said, you've had people come in and out of the business, I'm sure, that haven't been the right fit, and for whatever reason, and they've moved on, and that's fine, and the next person will come in, but you're clear on where you want to be, and I think it's such a valuable lesson for people listening, and people maybe even starting out on business, to try and get that. Know who you are as a person, and know what you want from that business, and what you want the values to be, and work with people right from a start.
I mean, I was talking to somebody about, what you're looking for. I actually just want somebody that wants to come in, do the best they can do. Doesn't mean to say they're going to be a superstar all the time, but they want to come in, they've got the right attitude. We've got some people that are brilliant at certain things, but they're not so good at other things. And again, this goes back to playing to their strengths. And we'll have a conversation with them. I'll speak to them about it and say, look, you're really great at this. This is where we need to concentrate. You working, and actually, are you happy with that? Is it something that you think? And actually, usually they go, yeah, actually, much prefer that to doing this. So nobody's perfect, as we know, but nobody's going to be brilliant at everything necessarily either. So it's it's working with them. But if they can come in and they actually give it their best, and look, some days we're not on our top form either. We've maybe got things going on in our personal lives that affect us. I completely get that, and we'll work with you to support you. And at the end of the day, it's what it is. But I think that's all you want, is somebody just to come in, give their best, and actually behave as I said before, like you would expect to be treated. Treat everybody in the same way you'd like to be treated, respectfully, you know, in a way that actually, you know, you treat people equally, but you treat them in a, you respect them for what they do as well. So I'm probably not explaining that terribly well, but I think it's really important that people turn up at work and actually, I'm not saying you have to park up your personal life, because it does impact at work, but you're there to do a job. You're there to work together as a team. How best you can work together. Sometimes there's got to be a bit of leeway because people understand there's maybe things going on and somebody's maybe not functioning as well as they normally do. What I love about my business is the fact I've got staff that will turn around to somebody else and say, you're looking a bit under the cosh, you're looking like you're, you know, struggling. Can I help you? That to me is a big thing for me, because I think that shows you've got a bunch of people that really want to work together and support each other.
I love that. And that back to even like right at the start of the conversation, talking about team and you working within a team, whether it be netball, and just that you've obviously something that you've inherited and that you love being part of. And one of the reasons you wanted to start a business to create your own team, which you've done. Yeah. And it's lovely to hear you talk, like, I guess, in that way that, you know, you look round maybe and go, I've created that. When it must be a lovely feeling to see another member of staff helping another member of staff if they're
and that's without any manager saying to them, you know, can you do that? It's like, actually, and equally, you know, I'm looking back thinking about somebody that we didn't retain, you know, because they didn't have that ethos, and it stood out a mile because they wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't do a tea round. They wouldn't, not that I'm saying you have to do a tea round, but you know what I mean? They wouldn't participate in these things. And it stands out because they're just not sharing, they're not sort of supporting each other. So for me, absolutely. I would say there's things, simple things like that, that actually, to me, I'm really proud of my staff, because I think, wow.
Yeah, amazing. Well, talk to me as well about, obviously, wellbeing training and stuff along them lines. We've talked a lot about people, and that's what your business fundamentally is about, but the business you've created as well. But I'm keen to talk about wellbeing. Have you seen a shift since the pandemic, and people more aware of, and actually staff being more aware of their own wellbeing as well? It's just become something we talk about a lot more, and how important it is to look after ourselves, right?
Definitely. Oh yeah, there's been a massive shift. So I set up Loch Wellbeing as it was then in 2014, and Bruce, who's also a qualified nurse, he was doing mental health training then, but he was also doing wellness checks, so physical checks. And it's interesting because, you know, there's certainly been, without a doubt, a massive shift in people recognising that actually mental health is really important, obviously, and we can talk about it in a much more open way now than ever before. I think the downside is physical health is probably getting ignored to some extent. And actually, the two things are obviously intertwined, because if you're mentally unwell, it's going to probably affect your physical health as well. But I don't think we're actually taking the physical health as seriously as we should do. So I do wonder, you know, we maybe sort of, yes, mental health is really important, because obviously, you know, you need to be mentally well as best you can be on a day-to-day basis to function properly, or to be able to to be productive at work. But there's also this physical side that I think we're not sort of quite addressing. But the shift on mental health has just been incredible. So I mean, I used to do a talk, and we're going back 14, 15 years ago.
Really?
We used to talk about the taboos at work, things we don't talk about, the menopause and mental health, and the other one was drugs. And we're still not really talking about drugs either. But it's interesting how now we are talking about the menopause and mental health, but you know, it's taken at least 10 years, you know, because we only really started talking about it in a much more open way 4 or 5 years ago. I think the challenge, obviously, in talking about mental health is it sometimes means that people become quite cynical, especially employers become quite cynical about it and think, oh, here we go, they're playing the mental ill health card again. And I think that's a shame, because that's a disservice to people that are genuinely mentally unwell. But there are people out there that are
But we're going to get
throwing
that
that into the
society
mix.
Always, aren't
Well, we had the bad back in the 80s. That's what used to happen. And the problem with the bad back in the 80s was we didn't have the technology to be able to identify whether somebody did have a bad back. So, somebody would say, I can't come into work today because I've got a bad back. It's a similar sort of thing. But there are people who are genuinely needing more support and, simply taking the view that actually, this is somebody just trying to, pull one over on us is, you need to look at actually, my view is you need to look at how you can prevent it happening, because it may well be it's work-related mental ill health. But if it's not work-related, how can you be supportive towards somebody in terms of, adjusting their workload, adjusting the times they're working. Now, it doesn't always work for, depending on the business you're in, you've got to think about what works for you. But I think you have to think about the long term, because you want to recruit people that are going to be with you for the longer term, because it's a big investment when you recruit somebody. You want to try and retain them. So for me, it's about how can you prevent things, the mental ill health side of things. How can you protect somebody's mental health? And how can you help them when they're going through periods, where their mental ill health has been affected? But I do think the other side of it is the physical health, which I do think we're not quite hitting the mark on. And I think one of the things that's going to be quite a challenge for businesses is that more people are getting diagnosed with cancer at an earlier age. And there's clearly a knock-on impact on family members as well. So, I think we need to think about the mental health impact of that, because there is that, obviously. But there's also the practical side of it. If somebody's partner has got cancer and they have to go and get chemo, you're going to need to think about how do you help their partner if they are your employee, because that's something else that, I've currently, dealing with it internally in our office. When I say dealing with it, we've got someone who's going through a situation like that. And my brother unfortunately died just before Christmas from a brain tumour. So it's, it's quite tough when you see the sort of what obviously the individual is going through, but the knock-on impact on the family as well. So I think that's something that employers are going to have to think about how they deal with and manage it, because, that's something else that is there. And there's no doubt there's more early diagnosis, which is a great thing, because we can usually then, treat the cancers, and hopefully somebody's not, terminal for, it's a stage where there's nothing that can be done to help them. But, I think that's something that's there on that, that's really looming on the horizon as well as concerns around diabetes, because that's a big thing as well.
Yeah. And it can be as well, I guess, a bit of a minefield kind of as a business owner.
Yeah.
You're like, how do I navigate this? Am I doing the right thing in regards to mental health? Am I doing the right things in regards to physical health, and all of those things? I guess, is that something that the training? What advice do you give to small businesses? How do they start? Is it getting policies in place? What's a couple of, especially from a small business point of view, sometimes difficult to, I haven't got the funds to put everything in place, but maybe to get training and stuff. But is there some advice that you can give just as a starting point?
Well, I do think policies, getting your right contracts, getting your policies in place, and being prepared to have honest conversations with somebody, and encouraging somebody to come and talk to you, because actually the last thing you want is somebody pretending to be doing something, like, for example, saying that they're off sick, when actually what they're doing is they're actually taking, their husband to a chemotherapy session. Sure. What you want to do is develop a culture where people come and talk to you. At the same time, you want to be able to communicate back to communication. You want to be able to communicate back what you can do to support them, but be open about the fact that actually you might not be able to sort of accommodate what they need. You do need to be aware about the legal position, because if you've got somebody who's got cancer, for example, that's a deemed disability under the Equality Act, and it means that you are obliged to make reasonable adjustments, which might mean you've got to change the hours that somebody works, the days that they're working, to enable them to go and get chemotherapy. Now, what's reasonable is ultimately determined by an employment judge, but you have to make an assessment. It's based on basically the size of the organisation, and a judge would take into account, if it ever got to that stage, that it's a very small organisation, it's maybe a start-up, there's a limit to what they can do. So they're not going to expect you, for example, you know, to say, right, okay, you can't do this bit, so we'll employ somebody else and we'll get a supervisor to do it. You know, there's layer upon layer because you can't afford to do it as a business. But you are expected to think about and consider what reasonable adjustments you could do to help this person retain their job. And that might mean varying the roles, tasks they do, etc. So that's something you have to be aware of. So I think you do need to educate yourself, and, you know, having somebody like, you know, an HR consultant, we obviously provide that service. They can keep you on track. So if something happens or you're not sure about it, having somebody to go to and say, look, what do I need to do? What should I be doing? You know, that's worth the investment, because it could head off problems for you later if you get it wrong. So I think it's thinking about how do you spend your money wisely to get the knowledge, to have the confidence about how you deal with a situation, to avoid the damage that could occur, because it is a minefield. I mean, employment law and dealing with people is a minefield. But at the same time, I do think it's not running away from it and putting your head in the sand, which is quite a lot what a lot of people will do, because they're hoping the problem will go away.
It never happened to me. I haven't got to deal with that, and then that situation does arise. Shit, what do I do now? I've got to solve that problem. And there's things you can do. You know, for example, you can put in place, you know, an employee assistance program, which actually, you know, especially with people who are maybe suffering with their mental ill health, you know, it gives access to a confidential helpline. They can go and talk to them. They can sometimes get free counselling sessions. Sometimes that's enough to get somebody through a situation and support them. And you would never know that they've been in touch with them, you know, because that's there. And that's not a massively expensive service to get. But it, you know, it's also another powerful message you send out to your staff to say, I care about you because I'm going to put this in place, which again is another important thing, because one of the other challenges for businesses is retaining good people, because it's still very competitive, and the pool of good people is, you know, a limited pool. So, you know, and it's not just about career progression. It's not just about money. There's all the other side of it, and so especially, I guess, the next generation, like Gen Z, millennials, whatever, that next generation of people coming through. There's so much more into, like, what are you going to do to look after me? I guess from a well-being point of view, what policies have you got in place for? And people, like you said, people are looking at that now, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, when we were doing the wellness checks before COVID, what we found was actually it was mainly younger people who wanted the wellness checks. Unfortunately, they're the ones that are usually well. And it's the older people that you want to be doing the physical wellness checks, but they're actually turning around going, I don't know if I want to find out I've got high blood pressure. I think that's shifting. I think people are maybe changing, but there's much more emphasis, I think, on younger people looking after themselves. They sort of recognise that actually, you know, they probably have seen, you know, maybe parents almost killing themselves, working long hours, and think, I don't want to be doing that. I want to take a different life. There's also an element about sustainability, climate change, and concerns around that. So they want to know, you know, what businesses are doing from, you know, that perspective, because again, that does influence some people as to who they want to work with, because that is an indicator of the sort of organisation, you know, and their values and how they, you know, will view their staff as well. So, you know, I think, you know, prospective employees are not just interested in pay. They're usually interested in your values, how you operate. You know, there are some businesses that are more sexy and more attractive than other businesses. There's not an awful lot you can do if you're in a sort of business that's not that sexy, apart from think about your values and how you can be seen to be attractive as an organisation for somebody who wants to work with you.
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
And it's so important. I think that we talk about well-being. You talk about mental. I had a guy on an episode that came out Monday. We talked about mental health in regards to mental fitness.
Yeah.
Because we talk about, you're alluding to physical fitness as well, and we do need to, especially as we're getting older, you need to look after your physical health as much as you do. And I think actually changing the narrative around some of those things.
Agree.
So just by changing, it's not mental health, we're talking mental fitness. Are you working on your mental fitness?
Yeah.
I think that just
because
changing
you're right, because that makes it more proactive.
Yeah,
Instead of reacting to a situation when you've ended up in a situation and then how do you fix it, it's actually how do you look after your mental fitness. But I do think you're right, we need to sort of widen it a bit further, because it does impact on, if you're mentally unwell, it's going to impact on your physical health as well, there's no doubt. And I think, going back to stress levels, how do you manage that? Again, when we were going through COVID, we moved quite a lot, pivoted a lot online. And we were doing quite a lot of sessions on stress and resilience and managing your stress. And I actually think, unfortunately, that's dropped off again. I think because we're all back at work, it's almost like that's gone, but it's not. It's just, we've we're taking our eye off the ball a bit on that. Because of, we've come through COVID now, we're all back at, we're not all back at work, but some businesses are trying to get people back at work. But I feel like we've sort of not, and I still think that stress does have a big impact on your physical health as well.
I think you're spot. I think that COVID was such a unique thing that we looked at, and you go, God, we've all got to pivot. And how many people come out of that and gone, I'm going to make so many changes from a business point of view, from a personal point of view, and then we go 3 years on, 4 years on, and we're here again. And many of us have got back on that treadmill and not, I will take that time out, and I realise what was important, and yet I'm still doing this now, and it's easy to do because we're just, it's human nature, we get back into sight, and that's how it works. Talk to me about what do you do to look after your mental fitness? Are you have you suffered with mental health over the years, or especially running a business and stuff like that, personal life? Has that affected you in any way? Or
I've not ever been diagnosed with depression, but I think we all go through periods where we have low periods in our life, and it's how we deal with it. And I think for me, I do try to sort of, I suppose, listen to my body. I've gone through very stressful periods, both working for myself and previously. And I do think you can see the physical impact on your body. Now, if that's happened, you've reached a stage where the stress is beyond where it should be. I usually spend quite a bit of time thinking about how can I suppose, put things in place to try and stop me getting so stressed. So one of the key things for me is surrounding myself with the right people. So my husband is probably quite a good de-stressor. Sometimes there could be stress caused as a result, but most of the time he's quite good. We have the dog coming into the office every day. My dog goes into the office every day. And she's very good because she does pick up, and sometimes she'll go over to people because you maybe feel that, sometimes there's, we get into situations where there's a bit of angst, and she'll go over to them and just make sure they're all right. Maybe they're dealing with a difficult situation. And so I think she's great. I do, as I say, do a lot of exercise anyway myself, but I think what I try to do is think about how I can improve things in my life, change things in my life to remove the stress from me. But I mean, I know I absorb other people's stress, so I try to I'm aware of that and try and think, right, how do I stop myself doing that? And I can see it in other people that I work with, and I'm saying, right, I can see what's going on here because I recognise the signs. So I try to be a bit more aware about how stress is impacting me, but try and put measures in place to stop it doing that. And that might mean, sharing a lot more. And I've now gotten myself into a situation where I have more senior people in the business that I can share things with. So it's, they always say that, don't they? It does make a difference when you share a problem and you can talk to other people about it. And I think that's really, really important, not to try and bottle up. But it's sometimes difficult because you might not have people around you to be able to do that. I'm now in a fortunate situation where I have that, which has made a big difference, I think, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, And actually, like, 'cause especially as sometimes as business owners, it's inherent in us to just be independent. Like you mentioned about being an independent woman, you mentioned about that, I guess, because of that, we tend not to ask for help. Like, I preach on it so much, and I talk on my posts, and that so much is about ask for help.
Yeah.
If you can't, but I'm probably the worst at it.
Yeah.
Like, I've been in some tough places, and I know people will be around me to help, and you just got to ask sometimes. And I'm trying to get better, but we, like you said, we maybe take on other people's, and you've got a problem, I'm going to solve that, and that makes me feel better, and I'm okay with that. But life's a learning curve. Sitting in this chair, I've learned more in the last 2 years than I have in my lifetime. So it's about having these conversations and trying to recognise, I guess not my faults, but where I am struggling and I need to improve. And I think so many listeners as well. Like, I can't stress enough the importance of going. So, and like I say, the episode that just come out Monday was about a guy who's set up. So he lost a friend, died of suicide, and he's set up a men's group to help men talk more, because we don't, and it's such an important thing. I think within society we need to, like I said, some of the taboo subjects, because I'd love to just touch on menopause, and I know we'd sort of spoke previously about that a couple of years, but again, something that should be talked about more openly. And again, I know we spoke about it before as well, but I'm really keen for business owners to recognise, and especially from a man's point of view, like I would openly admit, my knowledge of menopause was hot flushes and a few mood swings, and you know what, I'll be able to deal with that. Then going through my own experience with my wife going through it and being perimenopausal, and actually getting to a point where we nearly broke up over it, and you go, due to a lot of it, a lack of education. I'd like to think, I'd hope she'd say I'm quite an understanding husband, and but went through a terrible stage, and actually it was just trying to recognise some of the signs and other things. I mean, talk to me about your experience, I guess, with what you guys do and menopause policies and stuff like that. What companies can do, and like you said, you've seen a bit of a shift in that over the last couple of years?
Definitely. I mean, I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
You know, I still come across situations where people don't want to talk about it because they're like, "Oh, we shouldn't really talk about this about HRT or somebody that's menopausal," and you know, I'm like, well, no, we do need to talk about it, because it could be impacting on, this could explain why they're behaving the way they've been behaving. I think I'm very wary that we've got to be careful not to blame everything on the menopause, because I've had a situation where somebody had cancer but didn't do anything about it because they thought it was due to the menopause. So I think we have to be careful about women not getting into a situation because of a certain age thinking, oh, it's because I'm menopausal, because there's so many symptoms that you can get as a result of menopause, but there's also, these could be symptoms of something else, which is what happened, you know, with my friend. So I think it's really important we're aware of it, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that actually, if you've got any pain, that probably isn't menopausal, there's something else there, and it's always important, if you're concerned, to get it checked out. I think the great thing is we're beginning to see development of what we call menopause cafes, where women are getting together, you know, to talk about it, so they can get a better understanding, and therefore, you know, maybe if they've got some sort of symptom and they talk about maybe this pain, somebody will say, well, actually, you need to go and get that checked out. But I think also it's really important to talk about what you're going through, because I remember when my mum went through the menopause, nobody talked about it at all. It was called the change. Nobody talked about it at all. So as a result, nobody's talked to me about what to expect from the menopause. Whereas now, you know, I've got younger members of staff that have been reviewing maybe seminars and things I've been doing on it, and they're going, oh my goodness, I didn't realise this was all going to happen to me. You know, but at least they've got an awareness. And as a result, when something happens to them, they might then realise, actually, this is because I'm menopausal and not because I'm going a bit crazy or something's wrong with me. You know, because I think sometimes women don't know they're menopausal. They have no idea. Yeah. And it may be something like they become anxious about driving the car, or they become overly anxious about parking the car. And so as a result, they'll sort of stop doing it. But actually in the past, they were always fine with it. Now, these are small things, but it starts impacting on your life, because you've got to take measures to get a train somewhere or do something else. But actually at the time, you're not aware of why you've suddenly become anxious about that. Now, there's obviously some other women that suffer very severely from the menopause, to the extent they might not be able to work, or it's really impacting their ability to attend work every day. And I think, again, going back to what I was talking about before, you know, we want to have people with us for the long term. We are going to go through different stages in our lives. We need to have women in the workforce, because I think it's really important that you've got that gender balance, because women have got so much to offer. But also, you know, you've probably invested quite heavily in somebody. You know, you want to help them get through that, but also you want to make sure their colleagues understand what they're going through, so they can be sympathetic and, again, supportive at times when they need it, and understanding. So I think all of these things are really important. And equally, you know, partners, you know, it's really important that they understand how somebody is, you know, why somebody's behaving. If they're moody, they're really, you know, not handling a situation like they would normally do. They're really anxious about going out in the car, or they don't want to go somewhere because they don't want to meet people and they never were like that before. Is also flagging it up so somebody can go and get help as well, because actually you might spot the signs quicker than they realise. So, but I think the shift in talking about it is fantastic. I think we now need to recognise that actually it's not something, though, that we know it's there, but we don't talk about it, because it's going to impact people at work.
But this is the thing that, like, for me as a man, I'll go, like, whatever way we look at it, it's going to impact us. So whether you've got a sister, or I've got a mum, or work colleagues, or a partner, or whatever that relationship is, there's going to be people in our lives that are going to go through the menopause. So for me, I look back at, from my own experience, and go, what really helps was things like watching the Davina McCall documentary, reading the book. I've read them. Brilliant. And that opened my eyes to so much, and you go, wow, okay. So had I had that knowledge before, would I have noticed them things in Kelly prior to going through that? And we might have not gone through the situation we was. But I still, I think it's a we thing, and not
it's not a female.
Do you know what I mean? It's not it's not a
absolutely.
female. Menopause is female. We haven't got one. We've got a bit, but it's down to education. And I think, actually, like you talk about, maybe making the awareness of younger members of stuff. Do we start educating schools? Is it that at school, like kids find out more about menopause from, you even talk about fertility and those type of questions that we just didn't have the knowledge.
And we don't talk about menstruation either.
No,
it's still not a subject we don't address. And yet we know, that women, it's every month, that they are affected, and some people are very badly affected. And, we certainly in our office, obviously because of the job we do, we're much more aware of that. We're more open about it. But I think there's so many other places where, again, there's just, it's not something that would be ever sort of discussed or considered. And actually the reality is it's just one of these things of life, it's one of these things we have to contend with. It's, we have to think about how we can get the best out of people. And that might mean, for example, that, I know Spain has introduced period leave. We might need to look at that in the future. And maybe we should be looking at that now as a business without being forced to do that anyway. If you've got somebody that's having difficulty, again, if they're really great at what they do and they're productive the rest of the time, how can you get the best out of them? Think about what you can do. And don't keep. I think there's a bit of a habit of going back and looking at the past and thinking, well, we never did this before. This wasn't an issue before. It is, and it's always been there. We just haven't been open about it. Now we're open about it. Why don't we sort of actually think about how can we work better in the future? Don't think about the past. Think about actually how can we work better. But it is difficult, because you will get some businesses where the owners just don't get it, because it's like, well, we managed in the past, they just need to almost get over it and deal with it. Actually, as you say, it affects everybody, and actually we just got to think about how do we get, as I say, the best out of people, and really, for me, it's about looking after the people that you really want to look after, both at home and at work. Think about what you can do to sort of support them. And that might well be not actually speaking to them about it, because they might be really grouchy about it, and they might actually, so rather than sort of flagging up, by the way, you're really grumpy, they're grumpy, but actually you know why. And it's just, I don't know. There's lots we can do depending on obviously the circumstances surrounding the person and how it affects them.
Yeah. And like you said, I think ultimately it's got to be down to the fact that these subjects have just got to be talked about more. So they're not seen as and again, I'm speaking, I guess, from a man's point of view, that we just accept that this is the situation, and we've got to, because we can't look at it. Oh, well, that's what we've always done, so let's just keep going along them. We could look at anything like technology. You mentioned it earlier about just burying your head in the sand in regards to employment or whatever. So whatever we're looking at, just embrace these are the things that are changing for the better. The fact that we're talking about mental fitness, is that going to help reduce the suicide rate? Let's hope so, because we're talking about it, we're normalising that conversation. And the same with in relation into menopause, and how many women have given up jobs, given up
so
careers.
many. We don't want to, and we're losing really great people, from businesses, because people feel they can't cope, because they think their employer's not going to be interested in supporting them, or they don't want to get into that discussion. So we've got to think about, look at the number of people that we've got that are economically inactive or off work because they're ill with mental ill health concerns or issues. We've got another group of people that are potentially then going to drop out the workforce. As a group, a collective business all of the businesses together, we need to take a different approach. And I think we can't pretend it's not happening. It's there, and we all know about it. And because of the more open approach, it means that more people are aware. So you, as a business, if you want to be successful, it's something you've got to embrace, and you really got to think seriously about what do you do in future, because it sends out, again, another powerful message about you care about your employees, which is what prospective employees and your current employees are wanting to know about, is are you going to value me? Are you going to look after me? What's in it for me is inevitably is going to be, the question. It's not just about pay. Not anymore. So, get your management right, look at what you're doing to look after staff. You get all these things sorted out, and pay is important. I mean, benchmarking, we do a lot of that for clients, where we're looking at actually, are you hitting the mark in terms of the current market? So you're not going to get headhunters, recruitment agents chasing your staff, because that's been going on. Think about benchmarking, making sure you're still paying at the market rate, and they can't then come and sort of, say, well, actually we'll pay. I mean, they may well still come in and say, I'll pay you loads more. But, if you've got other things that you offer staff, and principally it's looking after your staff and valuing them, offering them development opportunities, etc., that's a whole package of things that somebody's got to offer that's going to beat that salary increase. So people will then think twice about, and actually it's a big risk moving job. So, what you want to be able to offer is the whole package. And that does mean valuing your staff and sending that message out to them.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like back to so much of what we talked about over the whole thing around culture, values, and creating that. But having that message that you're getting out shows that, doesn't it? Shows that these are our values, and that relates to everything that we're looking at, and all of our policies and all that. Just as we're coming towards the end, a couple of things, I guess. One, I just as a strong, powerful woman within the business community, again, what challenges have you experienced, I guess, over the years have you faced any challenges with being a woman in business within that? When you first start out and you go out networking, for example, less women in that high profile positions. Have you seen a change there? And obviously for the better, that we're moving towards a more equal society. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm probably a bit unusual because a lot of women at my age dropped out with their careers, and I've sort of been through seen it all to some extent, and there has been a massive change. I think, in the early days when I first set up, I remember going to meetings, and I had a solicitor with me, a man, and he was quite a bit younger than me, and there was an assumption that he ran the business.
Really?
Now, I like to think it's because I look super young, but I don't think it was that.
Of course.
But because I was 40 when I set up the business, so I realised I've just given my age away, which probably wasn't a good thing. But I thought that was really disappointing, you know. But you know, that was people's attitudes, and I think that's shifted quite a bit. It's possibly because I look older now, but I think that has shifted quite a bit. I think when I first started networking, everybody assumed that I was just going to be a one-person business, that I was just doing it for, I had somebody refer to it as being pin money, which is the old phrase for just, you know, basically it's just a hobby. So there was an assumption that because I was a female setting up on my own, it was just like a bit of a cottage industry. I was just going to, you know, poodle about and not do very much. And I'd like to think that's changed, in that if you see a woman setting up a business, you're not assuming that they're just going to be doing it for a bit of a fun and it's a lifestyle choice. I think people hopefully will take women more seriously now that they're setting up, you know, if they set up a business. I think things like, you know, awards like the Dynamic Awards, you know, are great for recognising, you know, female achievements, and I think that reinforces the message that actually, yeah, you are serious about setting up a business and you want to succeed, and you can set up a successful business as a woman. I've noticed recently that I actually am attracting staff because they actually quite like, and clients because they want to work with a female-led business, which is actually quite interesting and quite a big shift, you know. But for some people, that's quite an important thing, because I think for them, they see that as actually maybe quite an achievement, I don't know, or they see it as a really positive thing to do. So, yeah, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. And I mean, look, I've been one of these people that actually, I think, you know, you drive through situations. You know, I've gone into meetings where I'm the only female. This is before I started up the business. I'm the only female in a room full of usually finance.
Never phased you?
No, not really, because I think you just have to get on with it. It's your job, you just get on with it. But I can tell as soon as I walked in the room, you know, it's gone completely silent, I sit down. I think, if I'm being honest, one of the benefits I've had in being Scottish and having this accent is that I'm a bit different. So then they've got a female in the room and they've got this person with a Scottish accent and they're thinking, what is this? So I think that's been an advantage. But I don't, you know, I think you just have to get on it. You just got to drive through it. You know, you just got to get over it. And because that's the only way you succeed. You know, you've just got to, you talked about it earlier, you've got to push yourself through certain situations. Sometimes you're in uncomfortable situations. You know, I hated doing networking when you walked into a room and you don't know anybody. But, you know, over the years, and probably because I've got older, you know, you deal with situations better, but, you know, you don't walk away from these scenarios. You just have to get through it. And I think that's you know, how I've managed to get through some, as I say, situations where I didn't feel entirely comfortable. But I'd like to think now that's changed. You know, I mean, I notice at networking events and dinners in particular, there's far more women now than there used to be. But I've always been one of these people that, you know, I don't mind a comedian that says blue jokes. You know, I don't sort of sit there and, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Having said that, everybody's entitled to their own opinions and their own views. Whatever works for them. And now there's so many more opportunities for women to participate in events that they want to participate in, where they feel happier. But I've just always slotted into the male environment.
I guess, Ben, back to, again, that's why I always find it fascinating talking about people started their journey. You mentioned about your mum and getting you to be, you used to be independent people and an independent woman. And by that, that's probably set you in such good stead later in life when you have been faced with them challenges. Well, look, my voice is as valid as anyone else's here, and I believe in that, and that self-belief, and that comes across, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, my mum passed away a few years ago, and you know, I'm a great admirer of her for a number of reasons, but, you know, I think she did instill in me, obviously, the work ethic as well. You know, as I say, you know, unless you're dying, you've got to go to work. You've got to go to school. But, you know, I think it's this determination, you know, that you actually, if you want to get something, you've really got to go for it. And, you know, to some extent, I think it's really the backbone that I've got as a result of her really driving that into me. And, you know, I think it's something that it's not because I'm a female. It's what she instilled probably in all of us. And my sister's now, she was working in Scottish Government for a while. She's now set up her business. And she's a similar sort of character to me. So I think it's just, it does definitely drive you forward. And she's probably less mad than me, but we can debate that at the weekend.
Well, look, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I knew it would be. And I'm so grateful for your insights and sharing your knowledge and your journey with us. It's been brilliant. As always, I want to finish off with the last couple of questions. That my thing is about success. What does that mean to people, and trying to navigate that and define it. With where you've been over your different careers and the business journey, where you are now and where you're going, how do you define it? How do you define success?
Wow. I think success, obviously to different people it means different things. You've got financial success, you've got professional success, you've got personal success in my view, and you've got also maybe what contribution you make, I suppose, to the world in terms of success, or to, outside your space. I think success is something I reflect on as I go through my life. I was so chuffed when I got a 2-1 in my degree, when I did my accountancy degree, because in those days it was quite hard to get a 2-1. And then, when I did my law degree, I got distinction, which is very unusual as well. So there's that. But then I also, have had other successes in business since then. As I said to you earlier, one of my biggest, what I'm really proud of from a business perspective is I've built up a great team around me that all share similar values, and we work together as a team and we have some fun. But there's also personal successes as well. So for me, I've, got my son who's, I think, an amazing guy. Really proud of him. I've got a husband that loves me to bits, and I do love him as well. Debatable as to whether I love him more than the dog as we continue. But, I've, in my personal life, I've surrounded myself, and I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some wonderful people, including my mother-in-law and father-in-law and people like that. And is that success? Possibly, yes, because actually, had I not been the person I was, they wouldn't be with me, or I am. But, for me, being able to see them develop and achieve great things, that's brilliant. On another level, I've worked with clients in situations where we've found fantastic results for them to really help their businesses. And I've watched businesses that I've worked with for over 20 years develop, and it's great to work with them. But also I think what we've done is educate and clients along the way. So yes, we're having to deal with some really tricky situations, and we're having to maybe help them exit people. And, we do get to see the sort of not so nice side of people when we're sort of involved in working, in those scenarios. But we have educated and made change. So I for me, when we're talking about, I'm not saying I've been instrumental in talking, changing things in the menopause, but it's great to have been able to talk about it at an early point. And somebody said to me, I remember you 15 years ago, whenever it was, talking at a CIPD event, talking about the menopause, and people say to me, that was quite inspirational or visionary. And that to me is a great success, being able to, for people to say, I took something from that. And so there's lots of different ways, and I suppose I judge success. For me, in the business, one of my biggest things is looking at staff that have developed with us over the years, starting out, at a level where it's obvious they've got the potential to really do much more, and being able to help them achieve that. That is, for me, a massive success story.
There's so much for me to take up. A couple of things which I think we don't do enough is celebrating those small wins on the way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the fact that you've gone, success for me was this point, and then this point, and then this point. And that is so, because there's so much of us in life. We go, when I get to that point,
absolutely agree,
I'm going to be successful.
Yeah. And if you don't reach that point, do you see yourself as a failure? Whereas actually, all the way along, there's successes. We've managed to achieve, rankings in chambers, which is a legal sort of, it's a ranking where they go out and they talk to your clients, they talk to other solicitors, we've been in Chambers as one of the top, performing firms for the last 13 years. Been Legal 500 for the same length of time. We've got into the Times best law firms, 250 law firms for the last few years since it started. That's phenomenal for such a small business. And I would say I celebrate that with the team, because it's not just my success, it's the team's success. But that's stuff we have to celebrate, because you're absolutely right. There's no point. I mean, you don't know what's round the corner. You might not be here to be able to see that, to be able to celebrate it. Embrace and celebrate all these little successes along the way, things that are just amazing, things that happen to us on a daily basis, and we sometimes just don't celebrate them enough. You're right.
I think that's spot. I really took it was great listening to you go through these little stages almost over the journey, and then because I'm confident we don't do that, and I think it's so important that we do. And the other point I really take away, you mentioned, I don't know if you'd class it as success, but I 100% do. When you go, I've surrounded myself with great people. One of the reasons that the tagline says helping the world is because I really believe, unfortunately still in society, that we do measure it on a financial status, especially in business. We go, they're successful because, and we look at the financial status. Whereas actually, I've shared many times on here, and just that, I got to 40 and my measurement of success was I wanted to be a millionaire, and I wasn't anywhere near that. And I was like, fuck, I failed. And yet, what got me through a really, really shitty time was I changed the narrative of how I measured success. And I looked back and I was surrounded by people who loved me and who I loved. And you mentioned, would you 100% for me, that is I remember going, if I died tomorrow, but the metric at which we measure success was the people I surrounded myself with and the relationships I had in my life. I'm doing all right,
Oh, well done, you.
And I think that's that. I think if we change that narrative again a little bit, and people look to that, especially within the business world, that we go, actually, look at what a great person that person is, and look at the people that they've got around them, the team that they've built, like yourself, and the team are happy and we're happy. You know what I mean? What a great measure of success that would be for the society as a whole.
And I think it also reduces your stress level as well, because if you're putting all of this onus onto yourself to succeed in being a millionaire by whatever age, that's a lot of pressure you're putting on yourself as well. Whereas actually along the way you've done some amazing stuff. You didn't quite hit that mark, but actually, do you know what? You've got another 10 years to do it. It then reduces that sort of stress. And let's face it, we want to be here for as long as we can possibly be here. So, try and, do the, achieve and celebrate what you can while you're here. And if you get a big success, that's an excuse to have at least 2 bottles of champagne.
I'm with you. Final one. This is one of part of our top table events. We have our conversation cards, and one I've liked recently, and it's one of the ones that comes out. If you was on your deathbed, could leave one lesson, life lesson, what would it be?
Ooh, that's quite a hard one. I mean, I'd like to think I've probably learned it, but I think one of the biggest things is learn from your mistakes and embrace them. Because I think, I have made mistakes, but we all do, and and you've got to move on from them, but learn from them. Don't just sort of park it up. Just, spend the time learning from it and think about how you can avoid it happening in the future.
Pam, thank you so much. This has been brilliant. I've loved every second of it, and thank you for sharing your story with us. It's been great.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed it too.
Amazing. And as they say, here's a wrap.